Good morning, my friends. As Roman says, my name is Julian Vilas. I'm working for a company by the name of Red Static. We do create software for election processes. One of the main components is the electronic vote on the internet. I would like to say that I don't have the hacker ID, but of course I have the Video Club ID who can credit me for giving this talk. As Roman says, last year I gave you another presentation with my friend Juan Vasquez on security on scale regarding one product, and this year I'm coming to talk to you all guys about a very different thing. Um, they were going to talk about a framework security to develop Java applications by the name of Java Struts. I want to tell you that there are as two main branches or versions, branch 1 and branch 2. And branch 1, as you know, has been discontinued in 2008, and now since 2013 there are no patch at all for this. So, struts. Why struts? Why struts? What's the purpose of this? Last year, March 2013, I was starting working in Red Static, and there was a vulnerability affecting Struts 2. So we got an application using Struts, and we looked at this vulnerability if it could affect us. So we check all the information on this vulnerability. What the hell was said? Structure vulnerability. This affected to the branch to abstract, which can give us some benefit without having some privilege access. You can find a Strat2 access, and by accessing it, by communicating with this Strat2 application, you can benefit from this vulnerability that can affect all versions of the version release 2. The worst thing is that can lead to RCE, the remote code execution on the server. As you can imagine, my goodness, we act constantly and quickly to fix it as soon as possible. So we say to ourselves, okay, what is all about this vulnerability? And what I understood back at that time, we read the vulnerability description. It says parameters interceptors allows access to class parameter which is directly mapped to get class method and allows class loader manipulation. When I saw this, my goodness, I screwed up. I pissed out. What's the hell going on this? I can't get a thing, my goodness. So what did I do? So I went deeper and deeper into this topic, and this is the path we want all to follow. Let's take this vulnerability as the thread to go into the depths and the underlow of the strap and all these things. Why we got this vulnerability? Let's first talk about the OGNL, the Object Graph Navigation Language, which one of the pillars of a Strat. This is an expression language for getting and setting properties of Java objects. What objects can we get these properties? Objects that are stored in the context. The context, that's the thing. Let's say it more graphically. Let's imagine this is the context. Over here, on this context, there are four objects. These four objects are from Java, by the way, and then there is the root object Qx. Upstairs on the left, you can see an ONGL expression, the full dot get dummy, called the method dummy over the object food. Now hash bar dot dummy, it calls the bar dot get dummy is called. We write dummy as such without the hash and the reference of the object. We get a reference to the dummy method of the root of this context. And if we write dummy equals to, in this case, rooted com, we get, instead of calling the previous one, we get the call for q.setDummy rooted.com. The OGNL of Struts 2 is a modification of the original standard. In the Struts 2, instead of having one single object in the root, we have several objects, and it organized is a whole vertical pile with a stack of objects vertically. We got the property set dummy is look for in the upper part of this stack and following the reverse order. So let's wrap up the OGNL. Now, how can we process the request on Struts 2? We are having our browser and we are accessing an application on Struts. We access this URL. Let's get it. What is going on inside this Struts application? We can see that this URI, the hello.action, through the filter dispatcher is going through to identify what action we need to send the whole thing to be processed. When it's decided and sent, before moving to the action, the request goes through some interceptors that can check and do evaluations in consultation about the request. One of these interceptors is one of the famous parameters we saw in the vulnerability. One is getting through all the parameters in chain. The action gets to the request, interacted with the model of our application, and does what the application has to do, and in the end is derived against a result. The result is the one that is going to generate the response. The response then goes through the chain of interceptors in inverse orders, going back to the filter dispatcher, and this goes back to the user in the form of HTLM. Now let's see what the documentation says about the parameters interceptors. This documentation says that this interceptor sets all parameters on the value stack. They are reset on the value stack, as you can see on screen. And it also says that the names of these, because the parameters names are effectively all GNL statements, it is important that security be taken into account. Which means that if we got this URL, the hello point action, and we put a parameter, we firstly gonna find the class implementing the class, and we're going to do a push on the value stack, where our action is the value top. The parameters interceptors process the parameters. Okay, set push. Look, so the method gonna be hello where action dot set username administration. In this very case, the hello world action is having this method set username is going to call method set username in the packname. Here you can see an example of this hello world action, which extends a class of struts, and we are creating it an attribute username and their getters and setters correctly. We have seen that the OGNL allows us to differentiate getters and setters. What getters and setters can we target since the hello.action? In principle, if we write username, we're going to reference the username action of hello action. If we write the one you can see on screen, hello action username or hello.action username. Did you see that the hello world action extends to the class action support? So therefore, if this is an action start with many methods, we're going to access all these methods if we are not controlling properly. Besides, the class action support classes were of object, so you're going to access the methods of object as well, and the methods of objects, as you can see on screen. We have linked the previous thing with this one when we describe the vulnerability. The parameters interceptors as the parameters as OGNL don't get us access the method to get class. So let's now check what allows us to manipulate the rest of the things. The thing is that with the name of the parameters, we can make variations between objects. It's as instead of a name of a parameter, Instead of a word, we write different words separated by dots and points. We're going to navigate between objects. Assumption status is going to be translated into hello world class, which gives me back to the previous classes and statuses. So this is the marvelous thing of the whole thing. As you can see, the parameters are evaluating interactive parameters and getters until the very last getters, and the last parameter will be a setter of something. We can specify it as a value in a URL. Principally, it will convert automatically the ties when something is going to move to a string, to a Boolean parameter or a number it's per se. So let's move on to this point. What can we do with this? What methods, what setters can we use to discover the whole thing? There was a post published on a Chinese forum by Nearby with two things. A proof of concept, which allows us to obtain the setters we can get on certain applications, and then a method for getting RC on time 8. So let's see a demo of this tester works. Do you have a release modified for this tester? Because I introduced some comments which were very interesting for me. Here we go. We are on the directory of the Hello World on an Apache Tomcat 7. We can see that we have put inside the application directory the same variety tester. Now we are accessing the web server, and now we're going to access the Strut tester online. We access, and theoretically speaking, these are the setter methods we can get and target. You'll see it much better on screen, which means that setters can be resetted in their values. At this moment, I will mark out a pair of them, this one and the dot page, and these are the setters we are going to be able to set on Tomcat 7. Let's do the same with, let's raise a Tomcat 8 now. Next version. Let's launch the same process and let's see what happens. The idea was shown by the two servers, because class loader in the very end is something proper of the application server. Every application server through the class loader can reach us to several methods and not the others. We have raised the Tom8 and now the Strut tester, and we can see on screen a load of new methods. You can see the difference between them. There are some very interesting methods that we'll see later on. So, this tester job through several applications was done by me, and these are the results. Tomcat 6.7, there was a way of doing RCE, remote code execution, via DocVase, only in Windows. Tomcat 8 with the Axis 4, Axis 4 through RCE via DocVase, Windows only, with Sphere 8.5, developer, RCE not found, WebLogic 10 and 12, RCE not found, and JBoss 7.1. I found it with, I didn't find any way of executing remotely in the code. I didn't find the way to get the way to modify code. RC not found. We have been talking about Struts 2 all the time, but later they published a new advisory where they say Strut 1 is also vulnerable according to the new release. And in this very case, as you may remember, Strut 1 is unpatched. There's no official patch for Strut 1 because out of support. But there are some sites which is still using. There are some applications based upon of the framework version because they are not redone. In this very case, the different reason why Strut 1 is working so differently because Strut 1 does not use OGNL nor value stack, the key being population with being I suggest you should read this post posted by Albert Munoz regarding this issue. For those who are using Strat 1, they should be protected because there are no official patch. So please read these links online. Let's move on to the access lockback exploitation.
Access log valve affected Tomcats 8. So this is the chain that we will be using. This method gives us an object and class loader objects, and then we will have a number of properties. The first one is directory web apps, and then the prefix is shell. The suffix is .jsp, filelet format 1. And what will happen with that? We will be creating a shell1.gsp file, which is created in the web apps root. And this is what you map with a ULR bar. Then, by the time we will be asking requests about URL that do not exist, they will be logging within that file. And what happens if we do a request such as this one? So, for instance, we call a JSP that does not exist, then it will be logged, and then as the code parameter, we will just include the log file. And then if we ask to, then we will have the execution of the GSP code. So this is a demo now. I did the porting to meta exploit of the proof of concept, and you can see there it is in the trum, and you can check it against applications. Oh, sorry, Struts 2 and Struts 1, we just gave them support for that. So this is a Struts 2 application. The only requirement that should be of a vulnerable version. That's the only requirement. So it says the name, but if it didn't say the name, it will continue to be vulnerable. So this is the absolute weight of the patch of the Tomcats, and this is basically what you get by default, and then we will see what we get in the end. So I have just uploaded the module. The module replicates the IP ports of the struts, and then the URL of any action. Even if the URL does nothing, it is good for this. When you execute it, when you run it, it have send the properties for the GSP. It is being logged in there. Can you see how this JSP has been created to the right? It wasn't here before, so it is accessing GSP, then the code is executed, and then we have our shell. So that was Tomcat 8. As I told you that another property was dockbase. So dockbase is about the directory in the file system where we have the application, the files of the web application. So if we change the dockbase, we can ask him to point at a different directory, not at the original one. What happens that in Windows systems, in this path, we can say that it is a UNC path. That is to say, -- name of the host, /ushare folder, and that is a remote system. Well, you more or less can guess what we are doing. You create a remote server with a shared resource, then you include a JSP, and then in the application you tell him to use as a dock base the remote server, which is a shared resource, and then you access to the GSP. The problem with this type of exploit is that the original application stops working. But in this time, the original application stops working. So in this case, about the Metasploit module, it only works for Windows. Well, this module, I just wrote down before that it was not landed yet in trunk. There were some dependencies, but last night someone landed it. So you can use the same module now for the Tomcat 6 and 7 and for the Glassfish. So this is the exploit. We will do it by hand. This time we will not be using the module. So this is a different way of seeing it. So now let us go to Metasploit, and then we will generate a JSP shell. And we will keep it, we will store it in this shared directory. We are in the malicious server now. We are saving this Java shell in our shared directory. And now, as it is being uploaded, we will just write the chain to exploit it. Then we change the doc base dash dash name of malicious server and then the name of the shared resource. So here we have the JSP here, and now we will lift a handler of Metaexploit so that it communicates with the web shell by the time the web shell executes itself. So we run it now. Then we overwrite. Why do we get an error now? Because the action. So there is no GSP point in our server. It gives us an error. That means that we have been successful. We have lifted a handler, and now we will access evil.jsp. It will look for it in our server, and as you can see, we have shell in our system. And you go and say, okay, now I know Kung Fu. And what can we do with that? Well, what we could do would be, I don't know, looking for struts or searching strat sites. I will give you like two very stupid tricks, okay? No scientific base whatsoever. They shouldn't necessarily work. But often, you know, what the strat searches finish in .action. And then when it is configured by default, it accepts both .action and no extension as well. So if you look at that at the debugging time, when the mapping is being done, here this is a collection of extensions, which is like no extension or .action extension. So if you do a file tab action on the internet, you can see that many applications are using it. Very many are using it. And some of those applications where the .action, well, when you could remove the .action, this is what you get, you know? This is for you to have fun. Okay, for struts one, the default extension is .do. So in struts one, the mapping, you do it differently, so this time no extension doesn't work. But let me show you a couple of examples about searches on the internet. So city or Bank of America, and you go and say, well, is this a struts one? And then when you start to do your search, for search references, you want to find clients, but the only thing that you find is this in the archive in 2006, where they had some references to clients, and then you get Citigroup and Bank of America. Yes, in 2014 they are still supporting Strat1. Okay, we continue. And the next thing is that we want to check the vulnerabilities. Well, we want to check if a site is vulnerable or not. We will use cache max size. This is an integer. So for instance, in 32, this will be the maximum value that we have. So if we send a parameter to check the cache max size, for that value, it will be okay. However, if it is one more, that will be, will be break. And then if we add something which is not this number, the conversion wouldn't work. So these are the two chains to check the cache max size in Topcat 6 or 7 or class 5 fish. So we don't know, but now we know whether the site is vulnerable to DocBase or to access log valve. So we are killing two birds with one stone. So in the struts one, that doesn't work because conversion, when fails, by default the value is set to 0. But if we're trying to set a method that receives an object with a string, it wouldn't do the object conversion, and then an exception is raised. And well, so far you say, okay, yes, okay, I see, but tell me more. Okay, very quickly. Okay, well, previous security bulletins. I wanted to tell you all this so that you know how a strat works. So the first bulletin, I will only tell you about bulletins that allow you to execute code. The first one tells you that whenever you send a form struts validated, if the validation fails, field values are interpreted as OG and else. Then in 2007, bulletin number 3, it tells us about a vulnerability that entails OG and L, and then the parameters interception that we've seen. I wouldn't go into that because we don't have the time. That was in 2008, Bulletin 3. Bulletin 5, we see that from the patch, they came out, there was a bypass and you could continue to execute code. That was 2 years later. Then we continue, bulletin number 7. Whenever there is a conversion error, the user's input is evaluated as OGNL. And then in bulletin 8, we have several different things that make remote code to be executed. The first one is bypass to the previous one, 007, and then the other one is the same idea than bulletins 3 and 5, but this time not in the parameter interceptor, but in the cookie interceptor. And then in bulletin 9, we have a bypass to bulletin 3 and bulletin 5, okay? So can you imagine the next one? Bulletin 12. Incomplete fix, okay? 4, 3, 5, and 9. Parameters interceptor. Then 2013 includes parameter, the previous one incomplete fix. Then over evaluation, double OGNL evaluation. It means that if you give an entry to it and then it will include it within a OGNL sentence, if the value is fully OGNL, it will do a double evaluation. So user's information, the 20 is what we have just seen. 2014, the same problems with parameters interceptor and with OGNL, and then the next two ones are incomplete fixes on the previous bulletins. So here we see remote execution of OGNL code, all these modules with Metasploit, 7 years have gone by, and then, well, conclusions. Well, you can draw your own conclusions. And now, I would like to give some support to the developers of Struts. Okay, 10 more seconds about bonus track. I'm sure you are aware of Confluence tool. It is based on a webwork fork because actually previous Struts was born from that. And it has a fork. A fork has evolved on its own. So there are two bulletins here. The first one is class loader manipulation and the second one is double OGN evaluation. We know them all. And then, well, several versions of them. Well, if you look for Confluence sites on the internet, you will find several of them. And the good thing is that you will get the different versions. So this is a free switch, and then another one for Apache. No one knows them. And if you run these versions and you compare it against the previous one, you will be, well, positively surprised. Okay, this is all from me. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer.
Tenemos tiempo para una pregunta solo.
Well, we have time for just one question. Who is the winner? Does anyone have a question? Well, if you don't have any questions now, no problem. I'm around. You just stop me and you ask your question. Okay, give him another applause. Thank you.
Muchas gracias por asistir.
Thank you for coming.